Welcome to Shielded, the podcast dedicated to helping Florida's first responders understand the laws that affect their work and their lives. We bring clear answers, practical tips, and stories to help you when you need it most. If you're a first responder in Florida, this is your playbook. Be sure to check out all of our resources at bicklerlaw.com. I'm your host, Paolo Longo, and I'm here with my partner, Jeff Bickler. At Bickler & Longo, this is what we do. Now let's get into it. All right. Hello. Welcome back, everybody. Today, we have a very special guest, and honestly, somebody that I've been wanting to get on for a long time now. He is an Orange County Sheriff's Deputy and one of, if I may say it, I think people will agree, one of the most respected union leaders in our state. He's currently serving as the president of FOP Lodge 93, which has got over, 1,000, 1,200 deputies right here in Orange County. If that wasn't enough, he's also served as the past director of FOP District 7, which covers about 24 lodges over 10 counties in Central Florida. Not only that, he's the current vice president of the state lodge. In addition to all of that, and the cherry on top, he's our friend. Jeff Stinson, thank you for being here, my friend. Welcome to the show. Glad you're
Absolutely.
here.
Yes. Thank you guys for having me. Love you guys.
Yeah, that last bit is the most important thing, Jeff.
The friendship. That's right. That's right.
I'm a
Absolutely.
great friend for many years, so we
Yeah.
appreciate that. Now, listen, we probably need to start off. I'm hearing rumors that maybe somebody's taken over at the state level as president.
Yes. I've thrown my name in the hat, and I'll be running for state president in June. The election's in June here in Orlando. So looking forward to that next challenge. It may give me some more gray hairs, but
well,
I'm excited about it.
That just goes with the territory, right? But from everything I'm hearing, that's almost a fait accompli. I think you're gonna.
I hope so. That's my prayer.
And what's that say? Be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it, right?
I'm slowly learning that. Yeah, it's taken a little while with all these different things I've done, but I'm a slow learner. So.
Well, I mean, thank you for being here today. And
Absolutely.
really, the conversation that we want to have is something that I don't think happens, quite frankly, enough about, what the union reps can do for you, what your workers' comp can do for you. But I think most importantly, why you need both, right? And why having the best outcomes happen when we work together as a team. I mean, I can't stress the importance of the reps on the union side working with the attorneys. There's been too many examples where one hand doesn't know what the other is doing. And at the end of the day, we're all on the same team. We're all trying to provide benefits for these guys and gals out on the road. But sometimes we just don't connect, right?
Well, Paolo, I mean, you had a really great example of this. I know there was a case involving a waiver and a release, and maybe it was a resignation. And Jeff, this is so true. Like what we see, you guys are pretty dialed in usually on the labor side, at where you've got an arguable contractual violation of some kind, and you've got to go through your process. And you guys are typically pretty much in front of those issues. But when it comes to individual disability claims or work injury issues, there's always been this disconnect. And that's kind of what we've been trying to do, is fill that gap for you, right? But I know, Paolo, I think it's probably instructive even to talk a little bit about that case that you mentioned, because it really is so interesting, and it was devastating to the officer involved.
Yeah. So just real quick, and I was talking to Jeff about this earlier, right? I had a case, several years ago, and that's really kind of what sparked this whole conversation, or this whole sort of wanting to get into this topic and bring Jeff on. I had a case several years ago where my client he had an open workers' comp case he was treating, everything was fine. Then he got into some trouble at work. He had some IAs. He got put on admin leave without pay. So he got with his union rep. They filed a grievance, and they were going through that process. None of this I knew anything about. And about a week before the arbitration, his union rep worked out a deal with the employer to reinstate him, get him his back pay and things like that. And he signed all the documents, got his back pay, went back to work. And about 10 days later, I got a letter in the mail saying, "Oh, please advise your client there's no more authorized medical care because he settled his workers' comp case."
Good grief.
And I thought, what do you mean? So I called my client, and what's going on? And he sent me the paperwork. And sure enough, there was a line in that agreement that said, you waive all your future medical claims under this workers' comp case.
And Paolo, just to be clear, it wasn't really even that specific, was it? It was more kind of general language that he didn't even realize what he was doing.
Right, right. The guy had no idea. He's like,
Yeah.
my intent was to resolve the collective bargaining issue and the arbitration problem, but
Yeah. I'm curious how those even go hand in hand. I mean, because you settle discipline cases all the time. Why would that affect a workers' comp? And unless, like earlier we talked about, just the case of the attorney snuck that language in there, you know what I mean? That you waive all future claims against a current claim and future claims. That should have been a red flag in the discipline settlement for sure. And no doubt some communication with you guys hand in hand.
Yeah.
right, right. So once that happened, I said, I've really got to spend more time reaching out to the reps and letting them
So
know
important.
that please, even if I don't represent the person, even if they go to a different firm, I mean, the phone call is free. We've got to have another set of eyes looking at this because
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, we're on the same team. I'm not fighting with the rep. I mean, because there's tons of stuff that you guys do that I have no idea about. I don't know about discipline or
Yeah.
arbitration or employment,
Yeah.
right?
It's
So
like
I
you said, we should be coming alongside each other through that entire process. Yes, the discipline is obviously, super important to that person's career, but what you guys do is important to the rest of their current life and the rest of their life. I mean, so that's important that neither one of those are missed.
Yeah. And you
yeah,
know what, Jeff, I'd say even, ideally, when we get involved in a case, the goal and 99% of the time is to get the person back on the job and let them complete their career, on their own terms, right? So it's not as though we're working at cross purposes here ever, because it's always, the client is driving our case handling decisions based on what their own personal objectives are.
Right.
So if that means getting back to work and then, completing their career and finishing drop or whatever that is, we want to facilitate that. And at the same time, maximize the value of that case going into retirement, which in many, many instances, we find that, our officers, they go into retirement, our firefighters go into retirement. They have this really valuable workers' compensation claim that remains. And, that can be settled for a lump sum resolution where there's a significant payment to the officer going into retirement, which all, as you know, is entirely non-taxable. So, whether it's a continuation of those benefits or a settlement, there is a lot that is unfortunately left on the table with some of these cases.
Yeah. I think it's so important too that, say you put discipline cases aside as we're working with members and directing them through, a light duty situation or a no duty situation due to an on the job or off the job injury. That's something we do daily, weekly in our organization. I think it's so important too to communicate with you guys because there is a contractual side to that about where they're placed while they're on light duty and what benefits they may or may not receive at the time. And when I say benefits, I certainly don't mean health benefits. I mean, off duty, that's important to somebody and their family, their income, their job placement, whether they get a patrol vehicle or they have to drive their own to and from a certain location. So those things are stuff that we deal with every single day with people on light duty that may not be necessarily in your world, but definitely has a crossover that we all should be communicating to make sure that we get this employee healthy and then back to work. It just leads more to the contractual side of things and the day-to-day labor operations about where they're placed in the job descriptions they're getting. You know what I mean? And that's
Right.
that's definitely the hurdle sometimes to navigate people's lifestyle changes during that time.
How would you, Jeff? I mean, this is I think it's such an important point that Paolo has raised and now you're raising. Like, how is it that we can facilitate, maybe educating your reps on the ground? I was in Fort Lauderdale last week with their lodge, and they have a health insurance trust, right? And anytime there's a health insurance trust, they don't want to be paying anything that should be workers' comp, right?
Sure. Sure.
There's a built-in tension that exists there. So they were recognizing, well, hey, we're paying for a whole bunch of cardiac medications for people. We're paying for hypertensive meds. And even more critically, because this is missed all the time, antidepressant medications and anti-anxiety medications that a lot of officers are on, right? So we were having this discussion with them, spent some time with both the lodge and the trustees and trying to identify the best way to approach this problem. But what would you suggest we do in terms of trying to educate the union reps who are on the ground and having these interactions with the officers that we're talking about?
Sure. Sure. I can only speak from a position of being spoiled because we know you guys and I have a great executive board in my team that basically having one channel of communication and somebody directing that. So I'll give you an example. Any of my reps can represent anybody through anything, right? When it gets to a certain tier of things, when it starts talking about workers' comp, that narrows down. While they may handle the discipline case, we have a checks and balances here that, hey, if this comes up, it's coming to myself or one of my vice presidents to facilitate that. And everybody, all of them, all of my board,
Right.
they're going to direct that. They're going to direct that line of communication and benefit to me to get to you guys. So I think we're kind of spoiled here with that. I know that some of the other lodges have, like you talked about, trust. I'm not sure how that is set up. We here at the Orange County Sheriff's Office don't have an independent trust. The sheriff has the independent trust, and so obviously they're having the same issues. They want to write stuff off and get things out of the way as well. But
Right.
for us, it's a little bit, to be honest, spoiled and a little bit easier because if something comes up like that, I'm calling you guys,
Right.
my board doing that.
We're right here in your backyard, and we
That's
have,
right.
with you forever. But,
Right.
what we're recognizing is that there's a really massive need
Yeah.
all over the state. And,
Right.
that just going to Fort Lauderdale, like I said last week, and seeing, how they're struggling with these issues and not having things addressed adequately. I mean, it really raises a larger point about, okay, what can we do as a firm to try to facilitate, even if it's just that educational process? Because like
Watch the podcast, listen to the podcast,
Yeah,
right?
the podcast would be a good thing first.
That's
Yeah.
where we
Yeah.
started.
you know
Giving some
what,
plugs.
I hate to say, I mean, honestly, blow our own horn or however you want to put it. But I mean, we've done some really in-depth discussions on heart bill stuff and then the post-traumatic stress law, which is a complete disaster, right? I mean, it's just an utter disgrace.
We'll talk about that in a minute, Jeff. But so I mean, I don't know. I'm thinking of this as like the awareness gap, right?
Yeah.
You've got a population of people that have claims, right? But they don't know that they have a claim, and so I mean, my goal is to just always create that outlet for them to be able to call, right? And so that's why I like working with the union reps, and I'll reach out to reps I don't know or I haven't met, right? Sometimes I'll talk to my client, I'll say, "Hey, who's your rep? Give me their number. I'm going to reach out to them." Most of the time, they're totally receptive. "Hey, thanks for calling me. This is my info, and let's work together." Occasionally, you get somebody that's like, "I don't need you. I know what I'm doing. Whatever." And okay, but we'll see.
Yeah, Amy,
Um,
how you doing?
yeah.
And if I could just touch on that real quick, Bob, I think it's so important because as union reps, first of all, we're a business that alpha-minded people that don't want to admit when they're hurt or when they have a
100%,
problem. And they look at it and go, man, I'm okay because I need to work that off duty. I need to support my family. And that's all admirable stuff, right? I get all that. I've been there, lived it 23 years now. I understand it, right? But what's unique about the union relationships, I can't tell you how many times we're their first call for anything. I've helped people with, personal budgets. They break down to their union rep. They see that as a good sounding board. And I think that's incredible honor to have that type of person reach out to us and look for those things. So I think it's super incumbent upon that rep to have that challenge or that the guidance to make sure we're doing what's right, not just in the contractual world, but for our brothers and sisters in our profession, right? And with that comes this element of making sure they're taken care of while they're on the job and certainly into retirement. And so as far as you talked about educational pieces, you guys do a phenomenal job across the state, whether it's with our organization or our organizations, at least stepping forward and trying to get there. But it's really incumbent upon those reps to take that step and not think they know it all, right? And that they know everything and to try to settle a case. Hey, it's just one in, one out of a discipline case or a member, especially when it comes to medical stuff. Man, they've got to have that buy-in to make sure we're taking care of our brothers and sisters in this profession. So just wanted to say it's a super incredible honor to be that resource for these people, and they need to really embrace that.
Well, I completely agree, right, with how you're looking at these cases and how you're processing this and helping your own membership. But if we can make a commitment to you, you're coming in as the president of this organization, right? If we can make a commitment to you, we will get on the road. We will go everywhere in the state. I'll commit that to you right now.
I love it.
Where you point me where you want me to be, and I'm in Pensacola for your lodge, and we're going to do in-service training for your FOP reps, right? And anybody who's interested that has either a claim or a potential claim. The other thing, Jeff, is educating your guys as they're getting to retirement.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
That's way too frequently. They don't even realize what they have. If they've got open or pending or potential workers' comp claims and they're headed to retirement, remember, we can't even make a heart bill claim once somebody leaves an agency. So once they actually leave and retire, we can't make a claim for them, and they could potentially be leaving a great deal of money on the table by not taking full advantage of these legal protections. So please, that's an open invitation for the.
No, absolutely. I know you guys are awesome with that, and so I appreciate that. And that's definitely something we need to. If you guys are seeing that need and that a little bit of conflict between the two, that's something we definitely need to tackle to make it consistent across the state. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll take that off the plate for you. We'll just commit to it, and you just point us in the right direction. All right,
I
Paolo?
love it. That's one thing off the plate.
We'll go. Just wind me up and set me loose. We'll go.
I love it. I love it.
And Jeff, you mentioned PTSD a couple of times, so I kind of wanted to go back to that if we could. I mean, since our new law came out, I call it the new law, following the Pulse shooting, right? We've had this new law several times. That was here local.
It was, yeah.
You, of course, had a bunch of your own folks, right, respond to that, involved in that scene, right? That's a local, personal, thing that we all feel because that happened right here in our own hometown. You've been doing this long enough to see, I hope, maybe a culture change in law enforcement with this whole PTSD thing. Have you, what have you noticed? I mean, have you seen a culture change, and what are you seeing?
Yeah, I've definitely seen a culture change. I think what's super cool is that people are a little more open to discussing with their fellow zone partner, or they're confident that they have it at the sheriff's office. But I think agencies have done a really good job, and I think the sheriff's office has done a really good job in certain aspects of making sure that there's always these resources, and the communication. Like years ago when I started, I didn't talk about anything like that. I mean, that was, you're going to be shelved, you're going to be cuckoo, you're going to get your certification pulled, you're going to be out the door. And so I think the state of Florida through FDLE and CGSTC, and certainly that's funneled down to agencies, they've softened that up, tremendously. I still think you have, cases out there where people are just not, the old school people, they're just not going to do it. But certainly this new generation of cops, I would say within the last decade, are definitely more amenable to open up and talking about things and reaching out to a resource. Now, it may not be they need full, rehab and discussion, but even some micro base, like I talked about earlier. Hey man, I'm struggling financially. Can you help me out with a budget or things like that? Like you never would have heard that, 20 years ago. You know what I mean? So it's a little things like that. So yeah, I do see the culture change in that. Do I think we're there yet? No, we're not. We haven't reached the precipice of that yet, but it's trending in the right direction. And I think it's, we always put out, motivational Mondays or check on your buddy Wednesdays, that kind of stuff. And I always get a text or a comment back. Hey, thanks for that. Just reached out to somebody, or somebody will reach out to me. Hey man, just buddy checking you today. That's super cool. You know what I mean? So it's definitely, the barrier's been broken. I think it's in the right direction, but there's obviously more work we can do as an organization, and certainly that agencies can do to make sure that they're softening that up. But it's tremendous culture change from when I started, for sure, Paula.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it just since I started practicing. I mean, we would, this law's been around since 2007. Nobody called us in 2007, 2000.
Right.
I mean, the only time you would get any call was, when somebody was bouncing off a rubber room and it was too late. Right. I mean, that was the only time, or God forbid, you'd get a call from a widow where somebody took their own life, because they didn't get help, and unfortunately, we still get those calls.
We do. We've experienced, a couple of those over the past several years here with our membership.
But I agree with you that I think that the culture is changing just by the volume of conversations that I'm having with in a number of cases. And I think the best thing that has happened is that about 90% of my guys and gals that make claims for mental nervous health injury, they get treated, they call early, they get treated, and they go back to work and they finish their career. Right.
Yeah, that's important.
That I'm trying.
That's the best case scenario there, man. Absolutely.
Right. That's what we want.
And that's the majority of the time.
I mean, that gets back to what I was saying earlier, Jeff. I mean, our goal is always in alignment with our clients. What's in their best interest is, in most of these cases, to get the help they need and return to their career. And what Paolo was saying is so accurate. In 2007, we passed this, we call it, Mental Nervous Injury Act, which really only provided for medical care for a mental nervous injury or condition. And I mean, that was a law that was not utilized really at all in a solo capacity. What typically happened was we would have a client who would come to us with some other type of an injury claim, and we'd recognize that, oh, they're treating for depression or anxiety, and we're able to backdoor that claim. So it was really after Pulse that everything started to change from a legal perspective. I think what you're recognizing on a sort of a cultural front, that's the leading indicator. The lagging indicator is always the legal protections. Right. So that's where, I said this earlier, our current law is an utter disaster, because what ends up happening now is what Paolo has addressed and a little bit there previously. We get the worst cases now where somebody is already under internal investigation. They may have threatened their wife or beaten up their wife or their husband. They've been arrested and, or they're substance abusing. They're having multiple affairs. Okay. And we look into the case at the point of IA, and we find out there's a long psychological history here and maybe even treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder or adjustment disorders or, whatever the case may be. That is way too late to get engaged in a case.
Way too late.
Yeah. That's where the culture is kind of failing, but it's also where the legal system fails. Because once we try to go down that road and we're that late in the game, what we find is a very aggressive defensive approach where the claim is denied, it's fought aggressively. It actually makes the situation worse many times for the officer or the firefighter that is involved. Because not only are they fighting with this issue, they've got an internal investigation, but now they're fighting with their employer.
Yeah. And we've seen that, Jeff, on that point, we've seen that. And I've personally seen that in two cases that I've represented where, both of them are former military, they're stud of deputies, and that's the kind of people you want in your organization. But
Right.
unfortunately got in trouble before they could recognize, that they had an issue. And so I looked at that and I sat next to them for all that. It broke my heart because I'm like, I've known these guys. Like, what could I have done differently? And that's constantly the struggle there. But the cool part about both those cases is even though they're not continuing their career here, they're continuing their life. You know what I mean? And they've gotten their life better. And I know we talked about the ultimate goals for them returning to work and being a productive, protection of this society. But to me, I think even more paramount to that is that their life goes on and that they've recognized and they put that stepping stool and they've moved on. And so,
Yeah.
and I've had a couple of those people talk to younger members or other people, and they've been engaged in that process. So that kind of blends the cultural thing. People are open to talk about it. And these are hardcore, military people that probably you wouldn't think would have that kind of conversation. So that plays to the culture thing. I think it's definitely changing to that, but it is a shame once something has gone down a path that leads to discipline that could affect your employment or even your certificate with CGSTC. And so that's a constant struggle with us to balance. But more importantly, and it will always be paramount, is, hey, no matter if you keep your job or you keep your certificate, what's the rest of your life look like? And I think that's so important that as reps, if it's going down that path, that we don't just say, hey, okay, that's all we could do, but what are we doing for them beyond that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, in some of those cases you can't fix it, right? I mean, look, it's the last straw that broke the camel's back, or however you want to describe it, and they're not going back to work. Well, that really is even where the law should step in more aggressively to protect that officer or that fire. And that's where, again, our law is a lagging indicator of a change, right? And so we need reform. I've been working on this for the last couple of years. I did a white paper last year. Any from our office who did a Florida Bar Journal article on sort of the legal complexities associated with these cases. And we're in a position now where we can propose some really solid legislative reform that, I'm hoping in the next legislative session
Yes.
can get some traction about just common sense things that are going to streamline these cases, get them out of litigation, the medical care in place that people need, and where appropriate, provide for lost wage compensation. I think it's really, if you get right down to it, it's something that most people can agree on. But for whatever reason, when, we start talking legislative change in Tallahassee, I mean, you know how that goes. It's,
Yeah. It's going to go into a special session. We'll see how it goes here.
God
We'll see
knows,
how it goes
right?
here. Oh,
Yeah.
my lights went off. Hold on one second. Sorry.
You're good.
Stupid motion lights. My bad there, Paul.
No, you're good.
You'll have to edit that one out.
We'll edit that out. But yeah, I mean,
good.
but we have those cases where, the ultimate goal isn't going back to work. Sometimes we get the case where the ultimate goal is, I got to get out of this. I got to stop doing this. But there are things that we can work together, right? You guys on the union, on the labor side are helping them exit their department, right? My job is to help them, kind of cover their back legally to make sure that they're getting all the benefits that they're entitled to while they leave, whether that's through workers' comp, whether that's through a settlement or through, like a disability pension, right? Sometimes we've got to get into that, right? So, that's just another example of how, we as the lawyers work in tandem as a team with the FOP or the whatever the union is, with the rep, to get that person their goal, which sometimes may be, I don't want to continue this job. I do need to do, like you said, I got to have my life and finish my life. And, I've got a family and kids and things like that. And this isn't the best place for me. So sometimes my job is get me out of here. But that's just another scenario where, or another opportunity for us to work together with the union reps, to make sure that that person's going to get taken care of and that their goal is actually reached.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'd say that's so important too, because, the contract, I talk about the contracts all the time, when it relates to it. And the trend with that is you're seeing more meat and potatoes into PTSD and benefits when you exit the career, what it is. You're seeing that actually codified in contracts more recently, and it's trending in the right direction. So I know every contract's different. And I'm sure you guys see a ton of them as you navigate these waters. But that's why, playing to your point there, Paulo, it's so important that we come alongside of each other, because you can read the contract, but you may not know the spirit of the contract and what was talked about and how the common practice within the agency and all that stuff. And so we don't want these numbers to get missed on anything, especially if somebody is trying to exit for medical reasons, or they just say, hey, this job is not for me. There needs to be clear communication all along, and they need to get everything they can get, because in their service to this community that they deserve. And so I want to just challenge everybody that's listening to this podcast that we have to come alongside. We have to work together and cohesively. It's in our nature for our members' benefit, for our brothers and sisters' benefit.
Right. And I think that the contractual issue, Jeff, is such an important thing to understand, right? And yeah, we have different contracts and so many different agencies that we have to look at. Some of them are much more progressive in terms of what they provide and coverage. Some of them don't even reference the heart bill. There's no additional protection by virtue of the collective bargaining agreement. That was part of our case. We've got to look at not just what the statute provides, but is that enhanced by the collective bargaining agreement? But I would challenge you, and I want you to think in these terms, and anybody listening to this. Everything that exists in Chapter 112 and also Chapter 440 is part of your contract of employment, right? And so what we have to recognize legally is that, these special protections that exist in 112, they're incorporated into your contract by virtue of the Workers' Compensation Act. Right. And so that is missed many times, that our officers, our firefighters don't understand that these are actual extra contractual provisions that are there for, your protection.
Right.
It's another way to look at it, for sure.
Absolutely. Obviously, if I may, Paulo, I think it's so important, and just to kind of bolster the relationship that we have, and maybe it'll work across different organizations. We've called you guys for policy review. You know what I mean? When there's been a change to a policy that we get through via the contract, that we just want to make sure we're checking all the boxes and making sure that what we're doing on the inside is not affecting anything on the outside. Sometimes we can win those, sometimes we can't. But our position is we're not going to put anything in there or any kind of policy change that hurts or hinders anything you guys are going to do while they're working, or certainly beyond.
Right. And that's the message that I've been trying to spread, like my entire career. My job is to make you guys look good. Right.
That's tough sometimes.
I know. Look, I mean, I used to have long hair and everything. It happens, but
I used to have dark hair, and
I'm gonna try, right? I mean, but that's the goal, right? I mean, and we're a tool, to help you guys, get what you're supposed to get. Sometimes you need a screwdriver and sometimes you need a hammer, right? And when you need a hammer, you call me.
Right.
And that's what we do. But I mean, so anyway, just kind of in closing, Jeff, I mean, I'm so grateful for our relationship. I'm grateful for the time that you spend with us and the trust that you have in us to talk about these things and ask these things. And so it's really special to me. It's important for me to have you come on and talk about some of these things. And again, I'm grateful for your friendship and your trust. And, like Jeff said, wind us up and send us anywhere you want. We're here to serve you guys who are out serving all of us all the time. I mean, it really is an honor for us to be able to protect those that, protect and serve us. So that's just an important thing I want.
And I got to reiterate that. I mean, you guys and you two have been phenomenal friends. So that's obviously super important to me. But on behalf of all my members in the state of Florida, you guys have done so much for not just the law enforcement profession, but first responders as a whole. And so I value your friendship, but I just hold you guys the highest regard for what you do for our law enforcement and first responder families. And you guys are awesome.
Jeff, thank you so much for that.
No, thank you guys. Yeah.
That's very meaningful. And listen, last thing, just like you wind us up and send us where you want us to educate your reps, we'll make the same offer. The firm resources are at your disposal. If you want us reviewing contracts any place in the state of Florida, we're here for you. Okay.
Love that. Love that. Thank you guys.
So you have us as a resource, whatever you need.
Love that. Be careful. Be careful.
Watch it, Jeff. Watch it, Jeff. Watch it.
That's what we're in it for.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you guys.
Thanks, Jeff. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Shielded. At Bickler & Longo, this is what we do. We've represented thousands of first responders across the state of Florida. If you need assistance, don't wait. Please reach out. To learn more, head over to bicklerlaw.com or email us at info@bicklerlaw.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Bickler Law. And if you found today's episode to be helpful, please share it with a fellow first responder who might need to hear it. Until next time, stay safe and thank you for all you do.